In the final hours of his son's life, the father sleeps by him, completely unaware that this would happen. It's common to hear people able to express a desire not to have children, which is not wholly irrational, especially among younger generations. Certainly giving life to another creature and educating him until he's an adult who can support himself is a noble act, and it's a beautiful one when done in the right way. Also true is that today's society is rife with hazards, making it reasonable for a young person, in light of the perils that exist across the world, to believe that the most sensible course of action is not to intentionally subject children to the chaos that currently prevails in society. However, not all young people share this point of view. There are still young people who from an early age have expressed an interest in becoming parents because they understand that a human person can only be fully realized as a pair or as a family. They believe that it's worthwhile to fight for the education of children, despite all the barriers that may be placed in this. Camilo happened to be one of these young men, but not just any young guy, but a particular one who is destined to undertake the most difficult test that any human being could ever face in his or her life. In the end, though, who knows how life will reward someone for having shown such love and faith. One of the first challenges that Camilo had to overcome was the lack of commitment shown by women, which he was gradually becoming acquainted with throughout his life. After mentioning the prospect of getting married in the future and having children, the young guy was frightened away from his side. Despite the fact that he had a large number of romantic partners. Neither the coincidence of preferences and lifestyles that he might have with his present partner nor the length of time that they had been together mattered to him. In the event that Camilo broached the subject of marriage or children, the relationship came to an abrupt halt. However, even after he found a woman who shared his desire to raise a family, things didn't turn out as planned. The young lady's given name was Empauero, and she accepted Camilo's marriage proposal on the spot. However, more than a year elapsed between the time of the proposal and the day of the wedding, owing to the fact that the only riches the young man possessed was his will and he had nothing material to offer his future wife. Camilo continued to live with his parents because he didn't have a place of his own in which to relocate with his wife, nor did he have a sufficient income with which to pay rent. However, none of this mattered to him at all. Camilo was well aware that the most challenging aspect of the situation was obtaining his girlfriend's consent. The remainder would be taken care of through faith and discipline. From that point on, Camilo began working double shifts at the carpentry where he was employed in order to increase his earnings, and he continued to cut back on his spending in order to save even more money. He fixed his clothes so that he wouldn't have to buy new ones, and he stopped going out with his friends so that he would spend less money on entertainment each and every night, no matter how exhausted he was. When he returned home from work, Camilo praised God for his beautiful wife. Yes, because of his wife. Because he understood that faith is believing in something that has not yet occurred. And that's why he spoke of Empro as if they had already been married before the event even occurred. Camilo's perseverance was finally rewarded. A little more than a year later, he was able to tie the knot with Empiro in a straightforward yet joyful ceremony. His savings even enabled him to go to a beach honeymoon with his wife, after which they moved into a small rental flat in the city. Everything appeared to be unfolding exactly how Camilo had envisioned it all along. It was evident after a year of marriage that things were not going as smoothly as they should have. And it's true. Despite the fact that Camilo and Empiro were in a relationship on a regular basis at the time, she did not become pregnant after that. For a while they refused to accept the obvious because their wishes to establish a family were so strong on both their parts. They really wanted to think that they had only suffered from bad luck and that it was simply a matter of persevering. However, there came a point when they could no longer deny it. It was immediately apparent that one of the two was experiencing infertility issues. Although Camilo and Empiro assumed that things couldn't possibly get much worse, they were proven wrong in their assumptions. In his consultation and examination, the doctor not only confirmed that they had an infertility problem, but he also completed the diagnosis by informing them that it was not one of them, but rather both of them who had the problem. Not only that, But the treatment was not covered by health insurance and was quite expensive to pay for out of pocket, and Para was feeling dizzy. She assumed that this was the end of her hopes and aspirations of starting a family in the future. She, on the other hand, believed it was impossible for them to afford such a price. Nevertheless, Camillo put his faith in himself and his wife, patiently accumulating the money he earned from his double shifts at the carpentry business. The couple stopped going out to eat on weekends, as they had been doing, and instead cooked all of their meals at home to save money on treatment costs. And without fail, they prayed to God every night, pleading for the boy they so much desired. After a few months, Camilla and Empiro had only saved enough money to cover the expense of the first session with the specialist. They were desperate because the treatment had lasted more than 10 sessions. Empire concluded that everything had been naught and that the best course of action would be to get used to the prospect of a life without children or to consider adopting. Camilla, on the other hand, was the one who kept him afloat yet again. Faith is defined as the act of taking for granted the benefits that are requested from God. According to his life philosophy, which has always directed him. The only thing they had to do, according to their point of view, was pay for the initial session with the specialist and leave the rest in God's hands. It was difficult to persuade Empro, but once she did, everything began to fall into place. For the first time, God rewarded the couple's trust and Empiro realized she was pregnant. Just a few weeks after their first treatment session with him, it would not be necessary to pay for any of the remaining sessions. The pregnancy went without a hitch, however, when the woman began to bleed, things became more difficult to manage, and without any forewarning, without any message that would have led him to believe that something like this could happen. Camilla was informed by the hospital that the baby's life had been saved, but that Empowers had not since she died. During the procedure. For Camilla, the loss of his wife, the person he loved most deeply, was devastating. But he also felt responsible for her death, something he believed he had no control over. He may have been successful if he had not been so insistent in asking God for a child, had not persuaded Empower to pay for the specialist session, or had listened to her with the thought of adopting. His wife would have continued to live a long and happy life because he had to take on the roles of both father and mother. For the first time, Camilla was compelled to draw strength from sources other than those that he had previously known because, in truth, the most difficult test was yet to come. He did a good job of fortifying himself. Benito, as his son was known, was diagnosed with a serious illness when he was only 1 year old. Despite his best efforts, Camilla was forced to increase his efforts in the carpentry industry even further in order to earn enough money to cover the medical bills that his son's illness imposed on him and his family. However, everything seemed to be in vain, and the child's condition worsened as time went on. It wasn't until Benito was 6 years old that the doctors informed his father that there was nothing more they could do for his son. According to them, he only had a few hours to live after being admitted to the hospital. Camillo, however, was not discouraged. Guided by the concept of his religion, which taught him to take the miracle for granted before it occurred. In order to comfort his dying kid, the guy laid down beside him and offered to take him out for ice cream as soon as he recovered. Camillo would remember it till the very end of his life. Not knowing if it had been a dream or something he had experienced in real life. He was awakened by a celestial voice that night which spoke to him and said, "Say goodbye to the discomfort. The blessings will begin to flow from now on, no matter if it was a dream or reality." The truth is that Benito did not die that night. Instead, he gradually improved despite the physician's inability to explain why. Following his discharge, the first thing Camillo did after leaving the hospital was to take him to the ice cream parlor, where he had promised he would be eating. They talked to little Benito Dios about the importance of trusting in God, praying to him, and trusting all our projects to him, and having faith that no matter how difficult a moment may appear to be, God will have an answer for us at the end of the road. While they were enjoying the beautiful moment together,